Rich Beem, welcome back to Crazy Money.
Thank you very kindly. Good to be back.
Rich, there's a lot going on in the world of golf. Before we jump into the current events, I want to ask you, as a guy who spent a lot of years playing as a PGA Tour player, living life as a pro golfer sounds like a pretty sweet way to make a living. What's the lifestyle? What are the pros and cons of the lifestyle?
Um, if you like playing golf, it's like Christmas every day. It's pretty simple as that. It kind of depends on what level of professional you're at. I mean, I think if you're a professional on the PGA Tour, then yeah, it's definitely Christmas every day for the most part. And but the world's changing right now with golf, and so um, it's definitely a lot more lucrative than it used to be. Not that it wasn't lucrative back when I was playing. In fact, that's kind of when the boom spiked, where it is today. But if you're a professional golfer and you're out there on the PGA Tour and you're playing even halfway decent at times, it's fantastic. You're always going to have some stress. I mean, there's nothing that's never going to go away. I don't care whether you're, Rory McIlroy at the Tour Championship playing, or you're a guy that's on the cusp of just needing to make a cut, after six miscuts in a row. I mean, there's going to still be the same nerves out there. Just it's the way that you handle them, and different types of nerves, but it's still nerves no matter what. And I think that's the reason why everybody loves to play the game at the highest level, just because you're okay, you're comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that makes sense, and you're okay with being nervous. I think that's the thing that for most players, why some are successful and some aren't, is that they get to a certain level and they just don't like to be that nervous. And it's just that's the nature of the game.
Speaking of nerves, what's the difference in total, in terms of number of strokes, between the number one player in the world and the 50th player in the world? You're talking about
Oh,
you're talking about a huge difference in terms of compensation and recognition and fame, but what's the difference in talent level there?
you're probably talking um, not even a stroke around. It's probably a it's probably a half a stroke around, I think, is probably what it averages out to. If I think Rory's scoring average was, just under 69. And if you have a scoring average of, if it's just a half a stroke difference, that's two full strokes in a excuse me, in the course of a golf tournament. So your scoring average is 71 versus 69. Or actually, no, it's not true. It's so say that yours is 69.5 versus 69. You know, you're still doing very well at 69.5, but you're doing a hell of a lot better at 69. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that big. But the funny part about the scoring average too, though, is that there's certain players that seriously just get hot at certain points of it. They're streaky players, and it's just so their consistency is not going to be there, and their scoring average is going to be kind of skewed by that. But when they get in the hunt and they let the dice roll and they get after it, then those are the guys that you kind of get scared of, because you're like, that this guy has got no fear in him, and when he plays well, he plays really well. When he plays he plays crap, he plays really bad.
Right. Right. I was thinking about the way the tour changed in terms of money. And I remembered in 1992, I was flying home from Atlanta. Well, I lived in Austin, Texas, where you are today. I lived in Austin, Texas for a little while. I had been home in Atlanta, and I flew back to Austin on a Sunday. And on my flight was the guy who won the Atlanta Golf Classic, Tom Kite. Now, in today's world, would he be flying on a commercial flight?
Very few guys are flying commercially now. There's still a few guys that will. It kind of depends on where they're coming from and where they're going. But I mean, I'd say most of the players, unless they're going home and they live on the West Coast, anybody that lives on the East Coast, I mean, after Augusta, most everything is on the East Coast. They're all flying privately, they're hanging, going with somebody else or whatnot. But I rarely see too many of the top 50 players flying commercial anymore. I think it's just they've got a way of doing it, whether it's through net jets, whether it's through chartering their own jet, or just sharing with other guys. But I mean,
Yep.
it's rarely where you see a guy or even hear of a guy flying commercially.
Right. Now, a lot of that probably has to do with the involvement of those private jet companies in the sport, but a lot of it also has to do with just the absolute amount of money. I did a little research in 1986, 10 years before Tiger came on the scene. Our man Greg Norman, who we're going to come back to, of course, was
Super news.
was the tour's leading money winner with a grand total of $653,000, which would be about 1.8 million today. Now compare that to what Rory McIlroy won this past weekend in Atlanta. We're recording this on September 1st. He won 18 million. So that's what, 100 times more? No, 10 times more than what Greg made in an entire season. What's going on in terms of what's happened to money? Why has the money gotten so crazy in the last 25 years?
Um, I obviously because of Tiger Woods. I mean, I think he's the biggest reason because he came in where Greg was obviously very good at what he did, but he, it's almost like, he, people rooted for him because he put himself in position to win a bunch, but he didn't win that often. Just kind of, oh, it's so hard to win out here. And then Tiger sits down in a chair across from Curtis Strange and says, Curtis says, what's your expectations? And Tiger says, well, to win. And Woody says, well, what happens if you finish second in your first tournament out? I said, well, it sucks. I didn't win. And Curtis goes, you'll learn. And famously, he kind of comes back. Curtis goes, yeah, I guess he didn't learn. So I think just the Tiger just coming to the tour and winning at such a prolific clip, and then being marketable and having companies, even companies that it wasn't affiliated with, like Doral used to have the Ford Championship. Well, he was sponsored by Buick. They didn't give it, flying Farfignugan. They wanted him there at the Ford Championship, winning it because it's bringing more eyeballs to the Ford Championship, irregardless of he's got a Buick golf bag, right? And so sponsors didn't care. They were willing to put the money up as long as, he was going to show up. And so that's when the money really started growing, is in hopes that, he would be coming to their tournaments. And he kind of played the same events here and there, but the whole marketability of him made the tour that much stronger. And CBS and NBC wanted to make sure that they got their fair share of him. So they would, pick up the contracts. They wanted to, if they could show every tournament, and even irregardless if he's there or not, they were going to be able to talk about him in some form or fashion. And so I think Tiger's the one that really brought all this money into the game. And then once he started winning as much as he did, I mean, funny enough, I can make the argument he's bigger now than he ever was when he was playing and winning all those times, right? So I think that it's just the simple fact that he made the game what it is today. I mean, when I was a kid, nobody really cared about playing golf. Now,
Yeah.
and now there's, I mean, the level of competition is just mind blowing. I mean, you got kids turning pro at, right out of high school in some cases. And that was unheard of. I mean, it was unheard of when I got on tour for guys that were in their early 20s to go out there and start winning. I mean, it's just very rarely did you have somebody that was very young come out and win. And now, most of these guys are in their early 20s that seem to be winning at a massive clip. It's completely changed.
Yeah, back around the time you and I were born, we're just a few years apart, I believe. It's like, Jack and Arnie were driving around the country in their Dodge Darts playing for $500 and a carton of Marlboro Reds, like it was a totally different, it was a working man sport.
Oh, and I miss those days a lot because they'd also get done and go right to the bar and, start throwing back dry martinis as fast as they could, and hanging out and doing other things. But no, I mean, it's a completely different ball game these days. It's wild. It's mind blowing.
When did you first hear the rumors of a super league, the possibilities of a super league happening in the world of golf?
I first heard it, I must have been 2017. I think the PGA Championship was at 16 or 17 at Quail Hollow. And I was sitting there talking to Rory and Harrington, and there was some rumblings of this premier golf league. that is still around, to be fair. The concept is still there. We'll talk more about the concept here in a minute. But that's when I kind of heard about them talking about a super league of 48 players getting together, like F1, and having an individual event and also a team event um, tied in with it. And I kind of thought, well, that's interesting, not really knowing the numbers that were behind it at the time. And I kind of thought, well, that's an interesting way of doing it. I'm like, where are you going to play that? When are you going to play that? Who are you going to get? Is it going to be just off-season stuff? I mean, how's that all going to work? So I heard that in about 2016 or 17, but didn't really pay attention much to it after that, except for just what you would hear every once in a while. It just didn't seem to have the traction because you couldn't get the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour on board with it because, the players were, making pretty darn good money back in the day. And then all of a sudden, things certainly changed in a hurry in the spring of 2022.
And the PGA Tour needs to be on board because it's the official body that makes up the individual independent contractors who are the pro golfers, right? And there are rules and regs that you have to adhere to if you want to play on the tour.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's bylaws and things like that, rules and regs, like you said. And once you get your tour card, you have to sign that away. And when you register for each and every event, you sign away your name, image, and likeness, and whatnot. So hold on for once. I apologize. Zoom call, yeah, call. Yeah. Hopefully, you guys can edit that out.
I think we can. I think we can.
Perfect. So the PGA Tour, when you go to a tournament, the rules and regulations they have, you sign away your name, image, and likeness, and your media rights, basically. And that's fine. I mean, that's just been standard issue because that's how the tour is able to go to the TV companies and be able to sell those contracts. That way we're playing for the money that we are. And so, the PGA Tour has to sign off on a lot of things, but they hold the reins pretty good. Like whenever you would want to go overseas to go play in a tournament, you had to sign up for that conflicting release. I want to say it was like 8 weeks in advance. So you kind of had to know your schedule and know when you're going to be able to go play overseas and whatnot, or when you wanted to go play overseas. That way you can tell the tour that, hey, listen, I need an opposite event release. And most often they would grant it to you. I didn't hear of any times where they wouldn't grant you a convicting event release.
But you also had to play a minimum number of events. And this is one of the issues that keeps coming up, is that there's a certain number of events, and that guys like Phil Mickelson and Rory, that they're in demand for whatever 35 weeks a year. And when they play this event, they got to show up on Tuesday because they got to play the Pro-Am, all this stuff. So one of the issues is how much of the schedule is demanded of the leading tour, of all tour pros, but especially of the leading tour pros who have presumably career optionality.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's an interesting, way of looking at it, because I think that excuse me, I think that the minimum number of events you have to play is 15, and the tour doesn't tell you anywhere that you have to play. Well, that changed a little bit 5 or 6 years ago, where they said, listen, you have to play a tournament once every 4 years that you haven't played before, unless you have an excuse or a rational, a business reason why you can't, or a corporate sponsorship event why you can't do that. So that kind of changed over the last 5 or 6 years, I think. So it kind of took a little bit of the tour and just said, listen, we need you to support more tournaments throughout the year instead of just going back to the same ones you always do, because you still had Tiger going to the same. I mean, it was like clockwork. You can tell exactly where Tiger was going to play, where Mickelson was going to play, where VJ, Ernie, Retief, those guys back in the day. And then it kind of still felt true for the guys, the younger guys, the Jordan Spieths, when they first got out there, they needed to go play in these certain events and just kind of go to different markets in order to help the tour out as a whole, instead of just going to the same ones each and every time, just because of the simple fact that that's just a place they feel comfortable with, and it's not too far from their house. anything like that.
Yeah. So when does Live Golf come along? When do the Saudis get in the action? And Live Golf is a new golf league that is funded by the Saudi Arabian investment fund, and very controversial, of course, because the money comes from a regime that has done a whole bunch of unsavory things, human rights violations, including most notably the recent assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. Sorry.
So first heard about Live. I want to say first heard about it um, middle of last year at some point in time. And I've got
What's
a
your
dog
dog's name?
here.
First of all, what's your dog's name? Let's meet the dog.
Okay. My dog's name is Chaska. And I'll give your rationale behind Chaska.
Hello,
Ch-
Chaska.
yeah, this is
Hello.
Chazzy. And Chaska is named after the town that I won the PGA in,
Nice.
Chaska, Minnesota.
There you go. At
Yep,
Hazeltine.
exactly. At Hazeltine. Well, we were supposed to get a girl dog, and the girl dog was going to be named Hazel for Hazeltine, but we
Yeah.
couldn't figure out the boy's name. So I just thought, well, how about Chaska? So
Oh, that's great.
yeah, he loves attention, and I can't quite give it to him right now. So he might be barking every now and again, and that's just going to be.
That's the way Zoom works in 2022, right? This is a pandemic. Pandemic has normalized that kind of thing.
He'll actually be okay sitting here, I think, for a few minutes. So, anyways, I first started hearing about Live probably last summer when it first started gaining traction, and when Norman was announced as the commissioner of it, and that might have been earlier than that, than last summer. But I was still kind of confused, like going, okay, so this thing is finally taking place, and Premier Golf League has been kind of put on the back burner a little bit, with the exception of that they still had a lot of traction, especially with the PGA Tour, because they were reaching out to the PGA Tour and wanting to do business with them, not against them, with them. And where the Live concept came from, LIV, which is 54.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That whole concept was basically, it materialized back in 2011, the concept of it. So the Premier Golf League this concept came up in 2011. One of my colleagues, he was one of the first guys to talk to this group and say, listen, what kind of format can we have? How can we make golf more interesting? How can we make it fun? Bring a different dynamic to the game, change it up a little bit. I don't think they were looking to change the game. I don't think they were looking to go out on their own. They just wanted to have a different concept that might be, that might help change the dynamic of the game. But it was never so where Live came from, they basically stole the concept from the Premier Golf League. And the Premier Golf League originally started with the Saudis. And I know I'm getting part of this incorrect, but I'm going back on what my colleague has told me, because he helped develop a lot of this. And they were originally, Premier Golf League was originally talking to the Saudis, and those talks broke off years later. I want to say it was about 2017 or 18, just because they didn't like the direction of where the money was coming from, and they've already had a lot of interest from other folks in the financial world, things like that, and so they didn't really feel like they wanted to go down the road with the Saudis. Like I said, I'm kind of just glossing over some of this stuff. So, but I know that where it sits now, the Premier Golf League really wanted to go and work alongside the PGA Tour and create this concept, possibly after the Tour Championship was done, instead of having all the silly season event or the wraparound season. They were going to make this, okay, we're going to go showcase golf around the world. We're going to fly you in these big jets and so on and so forth. And you get to play 3 days, shotgun start, and, enhance your brand, show golf to the masses, bring a different, feel to it.
And make a lot of money, and make a whole bunch of money.
And make a ton of money. And who doesn't love money?
So what's Greg Norman like as a person, and what's his history with the PGA?
Well, his history with the PGA Tour is not good. I mean, I think that his original concept of having a World Golf Tour was shot down by Tim Fincham back in the, let's say it was the early to mid 80s. And Peter Jackson tells it perfectly. He says, you know what? We went into this room with a bunch of players, and Greg was going to spearhead this thing, talking about, hey, listen, we need to put, some heat on Commissioner Fincham to create this World Golf Tour, just to, a put more money in our pockets worldwide, by playing around the world and just enhancing our brands. And these players walked in, including Arnold Palmer. And once Greg started talking, Palmer goes, are you saying that we're going to go against the PGA Tour? We're going to move out on our own, branch on our own? And Norman basically says, yes. Palmer got up and walked out. And when Palmer walked out, so did 95% of the room.
Yeah, you lose the room with Arnie.
You lose the room. And since then, it's I think Norman was slighted by that. I'm sure he'll tell you a completely different story. I'm just rehashing what Peter Jacobson told me, and there you go. But I think that his relationship with the tour has always been contentious. But it's funny to me is that without the PGA Tour and their platform, where else was he going to play around the world and get the notoriety that he did? No place. He was a superstar in the game of golf. He's not going to become a superstar by playing anywhere else in the world. Only on the U.S.
Right.
If he'd opted to stay in Japan because he made a lot more money from sponsors in Japan and things like that, that's going to make him rich, but it's not going to make him a superstar in the game.
Yeah.
So
and he seems to be a guy that relishes the spotlight and likes to be. I mean, he was a flashy guy. He seemed to be very materialistic. He was into big, women and cars and all that kind of stuff.
And boats and things like that. What was it in 86 when he lost to Nick Faldo? He says, well, I'm gonna go get on my boat and go cry in my beers, in my 80-foot, whatever it was. It's like,
yeah,
well, yeah, you probably should be crying. I think that's pretty devastating when you lose a lead that big at Augusta National, the one place that you covet winning at.
Right. The one
his reaction.
The one thing he couldn't get, and he lost a big Sunday lead in 96, and then he sort of writes it off by saying, well, I'm rich and handsome and I've got all kinds of women waiting for me. What do I need that for? Which is sort of the essence of what we're talking about here at Live, right? We're talking about money versus legacy in the golf world. And 9 months ago, I think most people, like Live Golf was a punchline kind of, but soon enough, cracks started showing in the PGA when Commissioner Jay Monahan took a hard line and said, we don't negotiate with terrorists, basically, and said, F you, you can't play in both. And then slowly but surely, he lost one great player and then another and then another. And now you've got people like, and for our non-golf fans, we're talking about some of the biggest players in the world. Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Patrick Reed, Cam Smith, who just won who won what TPC and the British Open this year.
Yeah, Players Championship and the British Open.
Yeah, I mean, he's a bad young man, and he just left the PGA to go over there. So the PGA has a real problem here.
Yes and no. I mean, they've got I think the problem is that they don't know why the players are. Is it just for the money why they're leaving, or is it because of something else? Is it because of the way that they think that PGA Tour is doing business? Listen, I could probably go down the list and tell you exactly why every single player has gone over to Live,
yeah,
and make an honest statement for them, other than even if it's just for the money. Talk about their background. Like Harold Varner III just went over there, and you talk about a guy that is just beloved. I mean, his personality is so good. And I know it took a beating, it took a little bit of a hammering when he went over to Live and whatnot. But I mean, for where he came from and the opportunity to get paid that much money to go play the game that got him to this position in life, you better believe it. I mean, I look at that move for Harold Varner III, and I think it's phenomenal. But yeah, you're right. The PGA Tour did have a little bit of a panic attack there when DJ left. I don't know that they were really expecting that. And I think that what the players did, though, on the PGA Tour, when they kind of circled the wagons a little bit, the players took initiative, and they had that 22-man meeting at the BMW Championship not long ago, that was a turning point for the PGA Tour itself, knowing full well that they had the support of the top players on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, you mentioned Harold Varner, which I think is interesting for several reasons. One, he's one of two or three African American players on the entire tour, right, including Tiger. And he, when the first players went to live, they tried to say, "Well, I want to grow the game outside of the America and all that stuff," and we all knew that was bullshit, right? It was about the money. But they've changed the tune, and Harold Varner said, the opportunity, this is his quote, to join Live Golf is simply too good of a financial breakthrough for me to pass by. I know what it means to grow up without much. This money is going to ensure that my future and my kid and my future Varners have a solid base to start on life, etc. So they're actually acknowledging the huge financial win. And given Harold's background, that's one where you can say, I don't know how Lee Westwood grew up, but it probably wasn't as rough as what Harold grew up in.
Well, yeah, the difference between Lee Westwood and Harold Varner growing up and what Lee Westwood had at Harold's age, through various sponsorships and this and that. That's a whole other box of Oreos to go down. But I mean, I just think it's an interesting, when guys talked about growing the game over there, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, growing the game in the United States, I think we do a pretty good job as it is, with what we do. And I think Top Golf grows the game pretty
Yeah.
healthily right now, and
Yeah.
they're going to be looking. And it's not like the PGA Tour is mundane and boring. I mean, there's lots of side things going on Fridays and Saturdays. I mean, all kinds of entertainment. They're not lacking entertainment. It's just maybe in a different arena. Or I mean, I guess when you only invite 2,000 people to your tournament versus 20,000 people, it's a little bit different dynamic. You can kind of you can move 2,000 people around a live event pretty quickly, much less the 20,000 people, or on a Thursday at a PGA Tour event, much less
Right.
the 40,000 or the 250,000 on the Saturday. So at the Phoenix Open, but you know, I, again, I think it comes down to money, whether you are capitalizing on something that you've done in life previously, your successes, as in Phil Mickelson, Bryson, Brooks, DJ, or if it's just if it's an opportunity because you are a great personality like Harold Varner is, but like some of these guys that I just saw take some of the money. I mean, I never knew Cameron Tringali that well, but here's a guy that's made $17 million plus on the PGA Tour and never racked up a single win.
Wow.
Well, and again, I don't want to pick on him, but listen, I understand you can't beat anybody on the PGA Tour. Might as well go over and try and beat 47 guys over on the Live Tour. I don't want to be that harsh, but that's the reality of it. I mean, he's had many chances to win, and all of a sudden, he can't win. He's already made $17 million on a tour that's provided for him and his family, and I mean, his pension is going to be amazing, right? Again, if he says anything other than this is a financial decision, shame on him.
You talked about the meeting that players had in Delaware, I believe it was a few weeks back. They have taken up different camps, right? I mean, it's now PGA players versus Live players. Do you think did Scotty Scheffler intentionally walk in Cam Smith's line at the FedEx St. Jude's Classic?
Oh no, not at all. I think that Scotty Scheffler was in a headspace that he didn't realize what the hell he was doing. So no, I don't think he did that. I don't think any player would do that intentionally, to be fair. I mean, you have to be some kind of real jackass to do that on purpose.
But there's real tension between these two groups, right? I mean, Rory said that they're going to play, some Live golfers are going to play with the PGA golfers. He said he wasn't looking forward to it when he goes over to play in the BMW PGA next week.
Okay, so that's different though. Those are guys that have already gone.
Right,
Now,
right, right.
nobody truly knew. I mean, it was probably a worst kept secret, but I mean, nobody truly knew what Cam Smith was going to do until he left. And so you had to assume, or we had to assume, that he was just going to go. He was still deciding. There were still a lot of factors out there, whether or not he'd already signed the contract and whatnot. I think everybody had to assume because he wasn't giving us anything else. And you can say what you want, but I mean, I think players are always going to have that respectability where it's like, listen, we don't know if he's going, not until you know it for a fact. And so what's different about it is that if you look at the Scottish Open, where those guys, like 4 players, were given an injunction to go play, that increased the field by 4. They paired they paired them in twos together. And so those players were on their own. They're probably going to do the same thing at the BMW PGA, but you got 20 guys. The live guys will still continue to play with the live guys. They're probably going to get, I mean, out there, they're probably going to get harassed by the fans. We will still show them on TV because they're still playing in that event, and we don't want to disparage the event. And we don't want to draw any unwanted attention, to live either. But I mean, it's just the fact of, that's what it's going to be. And those players that, here's the funny part about it to me. And I think that they're doing it to make a point or to ruffle feathers, I guess. But every single one of these players to a T, including Sergio Garcia, who I think is playing in the BMW PGA. Now, here's a guy that hasn't played in the BMW PGA in 8 to 10 years. And the reason being, from what I've heard from fellow players and guys in the know, is that he didn't like having to pay the extra taxes that he would win in the UK, because it's a pretty good crunch to pay, right?
Sure.
And I've known Sergio for 22 years, and I still like him. I don't have anything against him going to live. I really don't. But now he's finally going back over and playing in this. But one of the things that he said when he left live is like, listen, I've got 2 young kids at home. I've played out here on tour for 25 years now. I just want to, take some time off and be with my wife and family and friends, and take some time away from the game. And now he's adding events that are completely across the world. He's playing in Boston, and then he's going to fly over to Wentworth and go play. Are you doing it? Are you coming over to the BMW because you want to stick it to the guys, or you want to, showboat the fact that, I'm playing and live, I can still play over here because that's my right, and I've spent all this time and energy supporting this tour. You did. That's great. But you know what? Once you leave, you kind of leave. Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't get it, because why would you want to bring that undue stress on you? Because they are going to catch hell. They're going to catch a lot of heat and a lot of grief for the fans. And and as a commentator, I mean, I'm just going to call it like it is. I'm not going to say anything bad about any of these players. I mean, because a lot of them are still I would still consider friends. I'm always going to be nice to them, but if we're going to talk about business, and let's talk about business.
Yeah.
Why are you coming back when you say that you want to go and play in the, you want to play less and grow the game? I don't get it.
What do you think of the new PGA schedule that was released, and the new structure of some of these tournaments that was announced last week at the Tour Championship here in Atlanta? And is it really what the players were asking for all along?
I think so. I think that it's an interesting point, and when all this came down on basically Wednesday a week ago, I was kind of curious. Like, my first instinct was like, where'd all this money come from?
Right. Well, that's the big question. So has the money been there all along, or are they going to have to take it away from the charities that the PGA tournament support?
Oh, no. It'll never take away from the charities at all. I think there's probably been some business deals done that were probably coming down the pipeline a little bit, as it were. But I think that, unlike what the PGA Tour does historically, and taking their time and really kind of, making sure that everything they do is going to be exactly what they want to do and controlling every aspect of it. Once those 22 players met at the BMW, they knew right away that, something has got to change sooner than later, because we know that we have the top 22 players, all these players on board with this. And it'll be interesting to see, if they all do commit to them, as they say. But the money aspect of it, and I've got my own theories about it, because I love a good conspiracy theory. But that's for another time. But I was just surprised about how it was, and again, my first inkling, like, where's this money coming from? And it's not. I know we have a lot of extra money in the coffers at the PGA Tour. Maybe it's just flat out coming from there. Maybe it's coming from a different source. Maybe it's coming from, I don't know where, but I know the new TV deal obviously was a bit bigger as well. So there you go. There's a couple of different ways you can get it.
What do you think? How do you think Jay Monahan, PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan, is sleeping at night? And if he has regrets, what are they?
Um, I think he sleeps uneasy. I think it's a hard job for what he does. I think that when you're in charge of 200 some odd members of the PGA Tour and trying to satisfy all those needs. I mean, you have a lot of people that want to chat with you about some things, but you can't. You can only listen to yourself, and you can only listen to the people that make the difference.
Right.
And I think that's why you got the Tigers, the Rorys, the Jason Thomases, the Jordan Spieths, the John Rahms. These guys move the needle when they show up. You have to cater to them. I think Max Homa said it perfectly. He says, "Listen, when I'm out there playing with Tiger Woods, listen, I I'm not of the 20,000 people that show up. I only bring about a dozen of them that really kind of want to come and watch me. Everybody else is coming out to watch Tiger. So, and that's the reality of it. I mean, it's you have to cater to the biggest names in the game, and the rest of us are just kind of we're glad to be there type kind of guys. But in the same breath, the thing I love about golf is that you can be out there and be one of the top players, but still play for the $4 million they're going to give at some of these events, even though you're playing alongside Justin Thomas and you might be Max Homa and Justin's a way bigger name. You can still win that $4 million, and
Yeah.
it's all yours. But I just I don't know about any regrets that he would have, just because I don't know the process of every single thing that he does. I mean, I think that I'd have to kind of step in his shadow a little bit and kind of watch what he does and see how he manages everything. But I wouldn't I wouldn't criticize him at all. I mean, I think some folks would criticize him for maybe not talking more to the Saudis, or not having or kind of thinking about his stance about it all. I applaud what he's done and say, listen, you guys aren't invited back. I mean, you took the money and you went there. It's sorry, but this is kind of the way it works.
Yeah. It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback on his strategy, but I certainly wouldn't want his job. And you're right. I mean, there's all those players he's got to keep satisfied. How many times do you think Ian Poulter tried to get him on the phone?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I was thinking about this too. I mean, all this influx of money is gone to the PGA Tour, and now some of it's finally starting to trickle down to the Corn Ferry, because the Corn Ferry has been playing for the same amount of money forever in a day, right?
Right.
And so finally they're going to have a little bit more to play for and to help out, and they still don't want it to be a place where guys can survive. They want guys to strive and so they can get on the PGA Tour. But I can promise you this: as a 52-year-old member of the Champions Tour, there's a bunch of guys in various parts of the country where they live that are over 50 that are full-time members of the Champions Tour going, how about any of that money feeding up to us, since we kind of helped lay the foundation on this? Oh man, that's the thing. If I was Jay Monahan, that would be the thing that keeps me up at night, is dreading the phone calls from some of the guys on the
Right.
Champions Tour,
Yeah.
which you'll never get from me.
I'd love to hear Kenny Perry. I'd love to hear Kenny Perry go on a vulgarity fueled rampage against Jay Monahan on Twitter. Wouldn't that be beautiful, just to see
I
that
think
wonderful man lose it?
I I want to see what Paul Goydos has to say right about now, because he's always been outspoken about the tour. I'd love to hear some of the other guys that have just been, lifetime grinders out there and have had successes. There's no doubt, but I'd love to hear some of the stuff. They're like, oh, now these guys are making so much more money. That's the way the world works
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah,
guys. I mean, sorry,
that's funny. Okay, just a couple more questions and I'll let you go. What the big question is, what happens with the majors? Do these guys get to participate in these independent tournaments that are partners of the PGA but not run by the PGA?
I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see. I think you're going to get to see the Masters and the PGA, because I think those are the two big ones. Because with the U.S. Open and the Open Championship, I've already kind of let if you've qualified through certain avenues, then you're in. I think what we're going to see is that you have to either be a past champion of the Masters or the PGA, or you would have had to qualify for that tournament because of a major win, not because of a PGA Tour win, not because of a top 30 on, like Joaquin Niemann finishing top 30 in the FedEx Cup or in winning PGA Tour event. I don't think they're going to allow those guys in. I think they're going to allow guys that have won majors and or have won, say, the Masters or the PGA, like Bubba Watson yesterday. I thought that comment was a little bit like I couldn't believe he made that. Like, if they don't want me there, then I guess I won't. You know, I don't want to go someplace that doesn't want me. It's like, couldn't you have just said, you know what, if they don't allow me back, winning the Masters twice is an achievement of a lifetime, and it'll be disappointing, but I can see their point of view. I mean, couldn't you have said that a little bit, more graciously? I kind of thought that was very blunt, like, well, I don't want to go if you don't want to have me. I'm like,
But
well, Bubba,
this whole thing is bringing out the worst in everybody, though. And
I know it is, and that's the sad part about it. I mean, I think that I think Augusta will allow their past champions to come back. I don't think they're going to shoo away Mickelson, Bubba, DJ, Patrick Reed. I don't think they're going to shoo away any of those guys. Same thing with the PGA Championship. I think they're going to Brooks Koepka come back. I think they'll have Mickelson come back if he wants to play, but I don't think that they're going to have guys again that qualified other ways unless they've won a major, and those exemptions are only going to be for 5 years. Because I think going forward, that might even go away. I mean, I know that Seth Waugh, the CEO of the PGA of America, is adamant about not letting these guys play in the PGA Championship. That one to me is going to be the most interesting because that one's the closest to my heart. Funny enough, but it'll be interesting to see how he handles it, because I think that his voice is just as strong as any of the other majors, if not stronger than a couple of them. I just think that the way that he goes about and does business and what his background is, I think that his voice is going to be is going to resonate with some of the other leaders, and they might follow suit.
all right, couple of questions from friends of mine. Cole in Cincinnati. It's very obscure, but he's my brother. How much is a major worth? Could you put a dollar amount on what a major win is worth?
Yeah, it's not 1 million. Let's see here. I think that back in the day we kind of looked at it. I mean, like Joe Ogilvy and I were talking. Funny enough, you know, back in the day, I think it was valued at like 15 million or something like that, just around the time that I awarded a little bit after. Nowadays, depending on which one it is, if it's not worth 50 million to you, then you have a really, really bad agent that needs to be fired.
From sponsorships and all that kind of stuff.
Sponsorships, corporate outings, all of it. I mean,
what does it mean to you have as a major winner? I mean, like, you can't put a price on being Rich Beem, 2002 PGA champion.
Yeah. I mean, like hear some guys talking about, you must, if Colin Montgomery gave you all the money he ever made for one of your majors, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to die with I'm not going to die with any of that money.
Yeah.
You're damn sure going to die though with my name still on that trophy and that Wanamaker trophy forever and ever. Amen. I mean, it's just part of history, and for me, it's there is no money. It's invaluable.
Yeah. For Yancey in Colorado wants to know if they approached you.
If they approached me,
yeah, were they playing you off a Faraday to try to pick the one? Which funny announcer were they going to have come out and provide the real entertainment?
Exactly. No, I mean, they didn't reach out to me. I'm not going to lie. I did sniff around a little bit. Not saying that it wasn't a full court press by any stretch of the imagination. I made a couple of inquiries to see if they had any interest, just because I had no idea what was going on with my contract and things like that. And I have to say, thankfully, they said, we're fine with everybody that we have right now. And I said, perfect. Once I thought about it, and I reached out to my agent. And that was the extent of it. I just asked my agent, hey, would they be interested? After I did that, I kind of thought, you know what? I really hope they say no. I mean, because I don't want to have to make that decision, because because then it's the same thing. It'd be all about money. And I kind of looked around and I thought to myself, I know I don't have a ton of it. I know that but you know what? I'm just dandy with what I got.
But what
I
no
don't,
is there a number that you couldn't walk away from?
I'm sure there would have been, but I mean, I don't have to make that, I don't have to make that choice anymore. I mean, again, it'd have to be, as Faraday said, it'd have to be a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. But again, it would, to me, I think it just feel icky.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't feel right about doing it. And I'm not I've never bashed, David Faraday going, because I think he probably needed to go for a creative outlet. I think
Yeah.
he just got tired of, being very quiet and not being able to say what he really wanted to say. So I think for him it was a massive creative outlet, and some guys, took a nice paycheck and went over there. And again, I got nothing wrong with that. That is their prerogative. I'm just glad that it didn't come to me and where it had to get thrown into my court. I mean, I kind of came up with a number, 15 million over 10 years, one and a half, I'd be going. I'm like, no, I wouldn't. That's just
Mm,
dumb.
yeah. 6 months ago, I sort of thought this was, or what, however many months ago it was, 3 or 4 months, I sort of thought it was a joke. And it's like, if Phil Mickelson and Pat Perez want to go play on the Live Golf Tour, that's not going to affect the future of the product on the golf course. But now I'm really concerned. Like, you want to see the best players in the world. You want to see the winner of the tournament beat the best players in the world. That's what golf should be. So what happens from here? I mean, you don't have all the best players on the same course all the time. Where do we go?
So if you look, there's only one guy that really made a massive difference. And maybe there's a couple of them. I mean, DJ
DJ.
was the biggest name.
Yeah.
If you look at Brooks, and again, this is just sheer numbers. Brooks, look at where he was on the FedEx Cup list. Look where, what he had been achieving lately. Same thing with Bryson.
You can
I
have
would take
Bryce. You,
same, I mean,
you you can have Bryson anyway.
take Patrick Reed. Look at Ian Poulter. The one that was really kind of was shocking to me was Taylor Gooch. Taylor Gooch was 10th on the FedEx Cup list when he bailed. I couldn't believe that. I'm thinking, why in the world is he going? That still doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, unless I don't know what his family background is, but if the money was just too good to pass up, maybe he's much better buddies with DJ than I know about, things like that. Because I know that's why Perez went over, is because DJ asked him to go and got him an extra 2-year contract and whatnot. But some of these guys, I couldn't quite figure it out. But I mean, now even I can still make a case. They've got some great name players, but what have they done? I mean, again, how many tournaments? I heard about 12 of the last 24 majors. That's phenomenal. That's fantastic. But I can tell you this as a past major champion, you're only as good. You're only as good as the last major you played in. Seriously, nobody gives. I mean, that's great that you won 2002 PGA Championship, but how'd you play in the other ones? I sucked. I don't even think I have a top 10 in any other major I ever played in, right? And that's the fact of it, right? I mean, but it's especially in this country, you're only as good as you were yesterday. I mean, seriously, people look at you and with the exception of a very few athletes, that what did you do today? I did this yesterday. Yeah, that's great. What'd you do today? It's really mind blowing to me how that can be changed. And I think if you look at a lot of athletes, they kind of go through the same thing. You talk about why athletes have so many issues, mentally after a while, is because we build them up. All of a sudden, when they stop performing, there's no more lights on. And oh, they're not good anymore. Oh, they're washed up. It's like they had a great career, man. You're telling me that I suck? This is wow, that's amazing. So I just kind of go back and look at the body of what these guys are, how to live right now, and they're not at their best. I mean, they weren't at their best when they took off. I mean, Cam Smith is the probably the ultimate exception, and DJ's probably right there as well. I mean, these guys were seriously every single week contending in events, and I think those two players probably hurt the PGA Tour more than anybody else. I think those two really sting. Taylor Gooch, I think it would have been another name, but beyond that, I mean, good names, fantastic names that people know. Phil Mickelson, but you know, he won the PGA in 2020. I mean, just unbelievable win. I mean, I watched it all. I'm still blown away what he did, but he didn't do anything since that. I mean, he just nothing, and it's just like it's almost like I don't know what happened to him. I mean, I just can't believe that you could play as good as he did that week and then all of a sudden just not come back. And he hasn't played very good on live either since he's gotten there. So I don't know. I don't know what kind of product they have, to be fair. I mean, I look at the raw numbers and I see this and that and it just doesn't add up.
All right. Well, it's going to be fun to watch and see what happens. It's half the game's not even happening on the course right now. So can't
Oh,
wait.
it's crazy. It's crazy. And I just, it does, I think, dilute the game probably too much. But I think the PGA Tour is in a very strong place, and I know that other folks are going to look at it a little bit differently. But I think the PGA Tour is in such a healthier place than what Live has because they've locked their doors after 48 guys. After 48 guys, we don't want anybody else in here. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's the interesting part to me.
Cool. We'll see. Well, thanks for your perspective, man. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Remind our listeners and viewers where they can connect and hear your thoughts on an ongoing basis.
Well, every once in a while, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, both at Beamer PGA. And if you guys ever across the pond or have one of those weird ways of pirating Sky Sports Golf, they can always listen to me in Sky Sports Golf.
I've tried to do that, but wasn't able to.
Uh, find some like 15-year-old kid. He can probably figure out how to pirate it for you. I mean, these kids know how to get a hold of anything anywhere around the world.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Hey, man, thanks so much. I really appreciate
Anytime, my friend.
Hey,
Anytime, my friend.
all right, 1 second. I forgot to ask you one really important question, which if we can, we'll splice back into the
Okay.
show. All right. Why is Brandel Chambly such a divisive person in this whole conversation?
That's a great question. It kind of goes back to, what you said about the regime over there. And this is something that I don't understand nearly as much. And I don't know if it comes from the writers or or some particular writers in general, but I don't know why golf has been singled out so much more than F1. Maybe it's just because they're team owned and not individuals that are deciding to do this. Boxers, other athletes around the world, the women's game has got a massive influence from the Saudis. In fact, I think their biggest presenting sponsor is from the Saudis. But I don't know if it's just some of the voices in the game that have gotten like Eamon Lynch, Brandel Chambly, John Huggan would be another one. There's a lot of them, but I don't know if it's just because we're all quote unquote independent contractors or what, but it seems like golf has taken a massive brunt about it. To be fair, I don't understand it now. I can't, again, I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but we do business, every country in the world does business with Saudi Arabia.
As does every business that is a partner to the PGA Tour.
That's exactly right. So that part of it I don't get. I mean, why are we hammering on the individuals that have decided to go do this instead of, I mean, obviously we're not going to make a dent in the corporations that do business with them and things like that. I think it's easier to pick out the individuals and attack them and do that. But, I don't understand here's the thing about it. If if we didn't talk about it, would that hurt him more or less? I think, or talking about him incessantly. I think the more that we talk about Live and the more we talk about what they're doing and how they're doing it, I think that just feeds into their brand. If nobody talked about Live, and nobody said anything about that, anything about that series, we're just feeding into them. I just think the more you talk about them, you're just giving them more firepower and more like, hey, they're talking about us. We must be doing something right. If nobody says anything to you, if you ignore somebody for long enough, what's going to hurt you? If you're going to, you have two options. You're going to yell at somebody insensibly and get right in their face, or you ignore them. You don't say anything to them. Which one gets under your skin more? I think being ignored would just like infuriate anybody a hell of a lot more than having somebody having a shouting match.
So why do people find Brandel Chambly so cloying, I suppose is a word that.
Well, I think just because he's, he wants to talk about it, and he's always got a platform. And the one thing I can say about Brandel is he does his homework. He gets behind everything he says. And granted, I don't necessarily agree with everything that he has to say. I respect what he does because he does a lot of homework. But after a while, I would rather not say a single thing about him.
Right.
I would rather choose to ignore everything that Liv does.
Yeah.
I would not. I mean, I haven't seen a single shot hit. I saw a website once and I looked at it and it was just so confusing. I lied. I think I saw Dustin Johnson hit a shot once and somebody else hit a shot once on YouTube just to see what the product looked like. And I'm like, I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah.
If you obviously you have to search it on YouTube. You have to look it up here and there on the website. You have to kind of see, and and the website isn't even that good. I'm just kind of curious, like if we stop talking about it, if nobody at the Golf Channel, if nobody at ESPN, if nobody at any NBC, CBS Sports, Sky Sports, if nobody talked about what they were doing, not a single thing. Nobody showed up in the media press room. Nobody showed up to talk to them. There was no outside cameras. Nobody came in. How would that hurt them? I think that would hurt them a lot more than people going up into these tournaments and attacking the players and asking them these questions, about,
Yeah.
well, if Putin had a regime and is going to play golf, how would that happen? I mean,
yeah. Well,
don't show up.
I think people are tired of it. I think my friends and I it's like, okay, we got to talk about something else. Let's play golf.
Oh, exactly. And so, I mean, trust me, I told my producers this week. I said, right after on Sunday night, I said, I want you to know that I am off work next week, and if I see any phone call comes in from +44 that I have no idea who it is, I am not answering it. I am not doing any interviews. I'm not doing anything for Sky Sports News. I'm not doing anything for Sky Sports Golf. I'm like, I don't care. And if the more that other people didn't care, I think that would really agitate them. And I think that it would, I mean, again, I think that if you just ignore them, it's not that you expect them to go away, but it's really going to piss them off. And I think that's the best thing you can do is just ignore them.
That's great.
Ignore them, walk away from the conversation.
I think you're right. And I appreciate you doing this interview, man. It's good to see you.
Anytime.